Hello guys, welcome back to this channel. Well, today I have something exciting for you guys. I want to teach you how to create a web API using ASP.NET Core and Entity Framework Core database first approach. So you have a database already set up, but you just want to use the database to, create an API for your customers or for your users to integrate and to consume and use. So this is going to be the first series. I will be teaching you how to create the API on this particular video. My second video, which I think will be coming out in about a week from now, will be how to consume this same API that I'll be creating. I'll be teaching you how to create it. So this video is aimed at or targeted at beginners, people that are trying to learn how to create APIs using ASP.NET um, Core and C Sharp. You don't really need to know too much. You can follow along. It's going to be a very easy video to follow along. And yeah, let's have fun. Let's create something and let's have fun. So I'm going to also teach you how to use Postman to check the results of your API. So let's start a brand new project. What should I even call this project? Let's see. All right, let's see what I'm going to call this project. Let's call it. Let's create a new project. Okay, so I want to select, make sure you select ASP.NET Core Web Application. Make sure you do that. And make sure it's also C Sharp. This one version for VB.NET, VB. Make sure it's that, and then you select that and click Next. I want to create API, sorry, API tutorials. API tutorials. Yeah, that's it. That's a good name for it. I think just for the tutorials, right? Let's create that. So it gives you these options. I want to take the API template. Um, that's the one I'm looking for. Okay, so we have a brand new slate right here. The first thing you're going to see is your controllers. Right now they have a default one which gives you the weather focus controller, and all this shows is just a return to data for weather focus, and that's all. And they have the weather focus class right here. I'm not going to delete it. We're just going to leave it there, just in case you see it in your own project. You can ask, you could see that it's just a default. It comes along with it. And for ASP.NET Core has changed the web config now to web settings. So everything that you used to have in web config now, we don't have web config now anymore. So we have that in the web settings, and this will, I mean, we have that in the app settings. I'm sorry, app settings. That everything now is in the app settings. So you will have to do your settings that you usually do in the web config in the app settings. So that's that. I thought I should mention that. And also there is a startup. Now this is one of the most important files. This is what actually loads your whole web APIs. It's startup. Here you can configure um, everything, and then this program.cs file, it's what loads it. It's like remember when you do console application, yeah, the static main void, it loads it from here, and then it calls that startup file right there. It calls the startup file, and then the startup file does all the bootstrapping and all those things to start up your website, to start up your API. So this file is very important. You could come here to do a lot of setup here, like this is where we're going to register our DB context and connection string. We're going to register them here and then it's going to configure it here and then use it. Okay, so that's the file. I just thought I should mention that. So everything. So let's just go ahead and start. I want to add a new controller, and I'm going to add a controller called users because I have a database already created called I think DemoDB, and I have a table there called users. So I just want to have a users controller to show all the users. And so basically we're going to get users, we're going to create a new user, we're going to update a user, and then we'll delete a user. These 4 operations will be done in this tutorial that I'm trying to get you guys to watch. Alright, so okay, when you come here by default, don't make mistake here because it's a lot of times people can make mistake here. When you select the add controller, by default it is on MVC. See this MVC right here? By default you're gonna see MVC right like that, right? Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it, guys. You have to make sure you select API, okay, and then API controller empty one. I'm gonna add that, and I just want to call it users. Make sure you don't delete the controller at the end, right? Just delete this and then just add your own user, right? And then click OK to enter. All right, so this is our controller. Just trying to reduce this so you can see, right? Very well. So this is our controller. This is a route of your controller, so it's going to be usually this is a local host. When you run, it's going to be on a local host, right? So it's going to be localhost / API / controller name. So that means it's going to be /user / our method name, right? So in this case, let's just build the signature of what we're trying to do so you could see, right? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get users, okay? The second thing will be create a user. The third thing will be update a user, and the fourth thing will be delete a user. So let's start up, right? I'm just going to do a skeleton and then you see how it works. Then we can go ahead to set up the database, and I'll show you how to save data to database and retrieve data from database and create a new user in the database and delete from database as well. But let's just start with this skeleton. The first thing I want to do is the get. So with APIs there is something called the verb API, HTTP verbs, right? These verbs allow you to demonstrate what action you're about to take. So in this case, we are about to take an action of get, right? So this is going to be an HTTP GET request, okay? Somebody is trying to call your API. Somebody's trying to request an information from your API. In this API we're going to create, somebody's going to request an API for us. Users API. This API just users, something like that. Somebody's going to request. How do we tell our program or application to know what kind of request is coming? So we have to set it here so that it will know what kind of request is coming. And if the person doesn't follow this request pattern, we are not going to show them anything, you know. So the first thing is the HTTP GET. HTTP GET, right there. In this HTTP GET, what is the name of the endpoint that you want people to hit when they're trying to get? You give it any name. Get my friends list, get products list, or get whatever you're trying to hit. In this case, I'm trying to do get users. So you put it inside there, and then you can do get users like that, right? So that is get users, right? And then inside here now we're going to write our function now. Public I action results. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not supposed to be together. I action results like that. Get. Now this name that I'm putting here doesn't really matter. Okay, what really matters is the endpoint name. To get users, this is the endpoint name. This is what really matters. Okay. So this is this. Whatever we return here, it's what the user will get. Okay. For now, let's just return an OK. So OK means everything is correct. It's going to be an OK result, or OK, everything is correct, right? It's going to return a status code of 200. If you don't know what the status code is, just go to Google and type http space status code. You're going to see some Microsoft is going to list out all the status code is, what all the status codes are. I'm sorry. So the OK is a 200 status code. It means everything is successful. Alright, for now, let's just return that so the application is happy. You know, we don't want to make it look like it's complaining. Alright, the next one is HTTP post. This is used to create or post an object. If you want trying to save something to a database or save something to an endpoint or anything, use the HTTP post. And this is the next thing that we're going to be doing. It's the same thing. You want the endpoint to be what you want it to be, the name that you want it to be, you know, specific. In this case, I'm going to just write create user, because we'll be creating a user, and everything is just the same afterwards. So I'm just going to copy this one here over here, and I'll put it here. But yeah, we're just going to create it just to create instead of get. The next one is HTTP put for updating a user. To update, if you're trying to update something in an API, in a RESTful API, you're trying to update something. By the way, this is a RESTful API. I didn't mention that. This is a RESTful API, so I didn't mention that. I'm sorry. This is a RESTful API. There is RESTful and then there is a SOAP API, but this is RESTful. HTTP put. The HTTP put is used for update, to update something or to edit something. You use the HTTP put. Alright, so that's that. Now the next one is delete, and as you can guess, it is HTTP delete. Just the same thing. I just want to make sure that I'm getting all of this skeleton, like the blueprints out. Sorry, HTTP delete right there. It's coming right there. Change it to HTTP delete, and then this is going to be delete user. Delete user. Okay, so this here is going to be delete. All right, now I've shown you this is kind of like the skeleton of everything we're going to do. Okay, if you're just trying to do a get, all you need to do is just do a get request, and you just do a get, and everything will be outputted out directly. Now if you're trying to do a create request, HTTP post, you will need to have an object pass along. That is what is called request object. Pass along that the user, the person consuming your API, will create that object for you and then post it along, and then you will take that object and then you will save it in the database. In this case right now, what I've done right now, there's no object, there's nothing, it's just a skeleton. What I want us to do is, let us go ahead and create that object and pass in the request here, so that the person consuming this will know that we require an object from them. If they don't pass the object, it's going to fail. So this is how we create the user, right? So let's go ahead and create that object. I'm going to add a new folder right here. I'll just call it models, so models folder, right? And then I'm going to call, sorry, I keep closing this. I'm going to call that, add a class, and just call it user request. User request objects. Okay, user request. All right, you get that going. So I want this to be similar to what we have in a database, and this is a database I've already created. I have these three records already in here, and I have like a username, first name, last name, city, state, country, and the table name is TBL users. So I want it to be exactly like this, so that when the person requesting to use our endpoint, they will have to pass this value, this properties over, and then we can take it and just manipulate and then save to database and create that new user. So I want it to be like that. And let's go back here and okay, I already have it typed out in a notepad or note file, a file, so that we don't have to type everything all over again. Okay, so this is that. I will leave it like this. You just go ahead and type. You can pause the video right here and type along like this. Okay, once you're done, you can continue the video and then we can go ahead. By the way, I already created a table, so you should create a table. I will talk about the database part of things, but I already created a table. Right now, I'm not trying to do the database connection stuff yet. I just want to show you the basic skeleton or the basic ways of writing the APIs, how to set it up first. Okay, then once we set it up, then we can now go to database and start retrieving stuff from database, right? So that is that. And we should now, I want to use the request body. I want to make sure that they know that they're supposed to use the request body, right? So this will be coming, the end user will be passing this in the body of their request. So we need to tell them that we want to take this. We need to tell our application that we want to take this from body. This is very important. So from the body, we are expecting um, this request object from the body, and they should pass us this request body. I'm just going to use a namespace, the namespace, bring the namespace in. All right, so they should be giving us this request body over, all right, and then that now this is the complete. It's complete right now. We'll do some things like programming and all of that, but I just wanted to set that up. Well, the same thing with update. With update, they also need to pass us the request body. So I'm going to copy this as well in here as well. Well, the delete is different. Delete is they don't need to pass you the request body. They just need to pass you the ID that you're trying to delete. In your database, you're going to have like an ID, right? You see this ID 1, 2, 3. They need to pass us just the ID, and then we can delete. But how are they going to pass us the ID? And how are they going to pass us the ID? All we need to do to let them know that they have to pass us the ID is we're going to put a slash here, and then we're going to put a curly braces as a placeholder to tell them that, hey, you're going to pass us an ID. And then once the ID is passed, we're going to tell our method that, hey, you are expected to take an ID. Now your method now knows that it's supposed to take an ID, right? This is how basic layout. This is the basic layout, okay, of all the 4 HTTP verbs, right? It's like this. Cool. Now before I start working on the database part of things, I want to just do a quick get to see that our get is working, because what if we spend all our time writing database code and our get is not working, our endpoint is not working, and all of that? We need to just quickly test it to make sure that the endpoint is working correctly. For that, I will just quickly create a new let's just quickly create more like a list of users quickly right here, and just try to call it, so what if we do something like private lists of, by the way, this is just a dummy, right? Don't pay no mind to this. I want to do something like what if I just use a request object, request user request object, camel casing, that doesn't take any parameter. I'm just gonna return this, but this is just for testing. No, don't do this. Just watch, or if you want to do it, you can do it. But this is just to let's just test to make sure that our endpoint is correct, so that we know that endpoint is correct, right? New. I'm gonna do like just username equals to ABC, and then first name is John. I'm missing an equal to, that's why it's complaining. I'm just gonna put that equal to there. Alright, so how about we just repeat this over and over and over again. I'm sorry, no. I'm just gonna copy that like two or three times. CDF as a username, Mary, XYZ. I don't know what that name, who has the name, but that's that. Well, so right now let's just do this, and let's just do a get here. Do this guy for user or users with a S, right? So let's just do that, and let's just return this user. This is just for test. I'm not trying to be too much fancy. Just to be sure that our application is working. And I don't know why, for the first time I always run this, it always doesn't hit this place. I don't know why, but let's see if it hits it this time around for the first time. Right now, it's just going to hit the first that weather forecast API. That's the default one that came with it. I didn't want to delete it because I just wanted you guys to know that there's a default one there. So our own is going to be API slash user slash get users. Fingers crossed it hits it the first time. It always happened to me that every time I build a new project, the first time it doesn't hit my controller. It does hit it the first time. That's good. All right, so let's just get the users. It gets the user 2, right, at count of 3, right? And then we have it right there. So you see that the user ABC John, all the other things that I didn't put there is null, but this is just to test it, and just to show that the API is working, which is good. What we can do right now is we could use an application that formats JSON very clearly and better. And I've actually downloaded Postman. If you've not downloaded Postman, you could just go online on Google and just type download Postman, and then you'll see it right there, and you can download it, and then you can use it too. I've already set up all these things a little bit so that we don't have to worry too much. So I'm just going to change the port number. So that when we start using them, we just have the port number is already changed, and then we can just use it. All right, so let's do a get. So these ones are the stuff in database. I've already been like kind of testing, so I kind of have all these guys in database already. So let's do a get users for the ones that we just did right now, so we can see that it's actually working. And yeah, it comes here still, and I'm just going to take off the breakpoint. We already know that it's working and it's hitting the endpoint correctly, and then it returns back our 3. So ABC John, it's just those two. I just put the Mary and then XYZ canola. So that means our endpoint is working, our API is working. Now that our API is working with just regular dummy data, let us go and learn how to use Entity Framework Core to get data from our database or to save data from our database. Now let's go and learn how to work with the database now so that we can have a full complete application that is actually saving in a database. So let's go to the database part. All right, let's go. Okay, so I'm going to stop this now, and I'm going to remove this because we okay, I could leave it. Let's just leave it, it's fine. But I don't want, actually, let's remove it. I don't want to use the request object to be doing all of that get. That's not the purpose of a request object. And this guy should be failing right now, so let's remove it too. And let's just remove this guy here. Alright, so everything is fine now, everything should be fine. Okay, now the first thing that we need to do is to install Entity Framework Core and Entity Framework.sql. All right, we could right click on your project and go to NuGet package manage NuGet packages and go to browse and browse Entity Framework. Entity Framework is going to be out there. We're going to be installing two things. We're going to be installing the Entity Framework and Entity Framework Core and Entity Framework SQL Server. So the first one is this guy, install Entity Framework Core. Okay. Yes, that's nice. Okay, that's nice. The second one is Entity Framework Core SQL right here. .SQL Server. Okay, you could see how many people are already downloading it. 137 million. It is used a lot. All right, so that's that, and I'm going to install that one too. Those are two packages I'm installing, and you can install it as well if you're following along. All right, so I got that installed, and you could close this once it is installed. So that's the first thing. Now the second thing is I want to show you the database that I've created already. So I have this DB demo database right here, okay? And I just added just one table because it's just one table we're trying to manipulate. I'm not trying to do too much of things. Just one table, insert in this place, edit, delete, retrieve, or get from this table, right? You could go ahead and create this table as well. If you don't know how to create a database, when you go to your studio, management studio, SQL Server Management Studio, you could right click here, add new database, like that. It's going to tell you database name, you add the database name, but I already have it, so I don't want to add anything. And then once you add the database, you can add new table. No, sorry, right click on table, you can add a new table like that, and you add a new table, and then you just do the same thing that I'm doing here. You see username, like let me show you my columns just so you know. My columns are an ID is a primary key, not null. Username is a voucher 50. First name is voucher 100, and all of that. So if you want to copy along, you can just do the same thing and just follow along and just create your table, which is nice. All right, so that's that. I just wanted to show you the database. The next thing we're going to do is to set up the classes that will help us to retrieve or query the database. There is one very important class that you need to set up. That class is the DB context class. Okay, that DB context class will inherit from DB context, and then you could set up your DB set class. Okay, I want to first of all set up my DB set class. Okay, this DB set class is just the same name as the more like the class for the table that we'll have. So this database have a TBL, my database have a TBL TBL users, right? So I want to set up that class here in my database. I'm sorry, in my C sharp. So, but I just want to kind of differentiate it a little bit. I'm going to add a new folder called data. So that's going to be like a data folder. Okay, so inside here, I'm going to add a class that will represent my table. Like it's more like a representation of my table, and that is going to be TBL user. Simple, right? And we're going to add that here. And I also want to, okay, now that is being said, I want to, remember it's a representation of my table, right? So the data will be more like what is in a table. So in here, I already have it typed and kept in a file. So in here, I'm going to add this file. Everything is the same as it is in a table, a TBL table. And remember, the ID is a primary key. So that's why I'm decorating it with a key. If you have this error that is showing here, you right click it and you select this. It's trying to just use the component model of data annotations, and you select that. Yeah, so this key now is telling C# that hey, this is a primary key on this table class. All right, so it knows that. The next thing we are going to do is to add a DB context class. Okay, and then this DB context class is going to go in the same place as our. I'm going to add a class. So the next thing is the DB context class, and this is, for me, I'm just going to call it the so if you look at my database, right, I just call it demo DB, right? It's a demo database, right? So I'm trying to have the same naming convention. Since my database name is demo, I'm going to call it demo DB context, right? So it's more like the database name and the context of the database name, right? So I'm going to call it demo DB context. Right, save that. Well, in here, this class should inherit from DB context. Okay, from the DB context class. So we have to import the namespace. Here we have to bring in a namespace using Microsoft. That's why you see why we install the entity framework core, because it needs it right here. So now I'm going to add a using statement, import it in there. So it's going to add it up here. So that's why we needed that, right? So in the constructor of this class, we have to do some setup. So just do your ctor. If you do a ctor like that and hit tab 2 times, just hit tab 2 times, it's going to generate a constructor for you, which is cool because I don't want to be like typing all of that. Okay, so now we have the DB context option. We have to the DB context option right here. Type your DB context option, and after this, everything is gonna be like. Then you have to pass in your demo DB, like your class name. I mean, pass your class name, context, like that, and just give it a variable. In this case, they like to put it like options, right? And this class will inherit from the base. Like that, and also just pass your options variable that you created there. All right, so that's it for setting up this class, but we need to tell the DB context. So from the DB context, we're supposed to be getting the tables, right? But what table are you trying to get? In this case, we have one table. If you have multiple tables, you're going to put it here. So in this table, in this DB context, we want to get to the DB set, and that DB set is our table that we just created, the class table, right? Remember that class table, user, and then this is where TBL users, okay, and that's, we do our get and we do our set, right? That's it. Okay. Oh, sorry, the set needs the semicolon. So that's it, and then we're almost set to go. We're almost set to start querying our database, right? We're almost very set, okay, to start querying the database. The next thing we need to do is to go to the startup file, right? In the startup file, we need to tell the configure services. In the configure services method, we need to tell the application that when it's starting up, it should load our DB context model and load it with our connection string, so that you can use the connection string to get the data from our database. So that being said, we need to implement our connection string or write our connection string. Usually, before now, before the entity and before the ASP.NET Core, the connection strings were being written in the web config, but now we don't have web config, we have app settings.json. So this app settings.json, this one right here, this one. So right here, we're going to write our connection string right here. And again, for me, I already have it written, but I'm going to write it just so you know how. I already have it written in a Word document, in a text document, but I'm going to write it just so you know. So that's connection string right there, and then the, whatever name you give here is going to be the name of your connection string. For me, I just gave it default connection string, and this is where I'm going to copy what I've already have over to save over time, and I'm going to explain it after I copy it over. All right, so this is the name of my connection string, default connection string. My data source is localhost. Now be careful with the data source. Be careful, because this might cause a lot of errors for you when you are running your code on your own and all of that. Now this data source is the name of your instance name. So you see how my management studio, the local host, is right there. This is my data source. If you want to know your data source, you can just click this connect button, this connect right here. You see how my own has localhost. Your own might have your computer name slash SQL Server Express. It might have something else, so be careful. Make sure it is the same as it is here, or the same as it is in here. Okay. All right. Um, that being said, initial catalog is your database name. My own is DemoDB. You could see it right there. It's DemoDB. Then everything else is pretty much basic. Integrated security true, and this one is true. This is because it is for local connection, you know. That's why we just put integrated security true there. Be careful about this connection string and your data source. Local data source, it used to cause a lot of errors for people that don't know what their data source is or instance name is. For me, it is local. For you, it might be different. For me, it's local host. For you, it might be different. So be careful. Verify on that one before you go ahead. Your initial catalog is your database name, and then just set this as it is, like this right now. Integrated security true. Multiple active results set true. Leave it like that, and everything should be good. Default connection is my um, connection name. So let's go now. Now that we have our connection string in its app settings, save it, and let's go to the startup. This startup is where your application will kind of load everything that is needed to connect to different things like database and some things. It's going to load it here and then get you up and running, get your application up and running. Well, in our own case, we need to we need to get our data connection string. So I'm going to do connection string. I like to type it all out just so people are watching, just so they can like know. And then this is camel kissing as well. So let's do that string capital S. So if you look at the configuration, this configuration here, you can use this configuration to get your app settings, stuff in your app settings. So configuration dot get connection string, it's right there. and this one takes our default setting. Well, it's the name of your connection string. For me, again, I called it default setting, default connection, and I like to copy it over just so you don't make mistake. I just like to copy it over like that, because if I type it I might make mistake. Okay, now that we have our connection string, we need to tie this connection string. We need to pass this connection string to a DB context, so the DB context can use it to get to the database. And then this is to do that, you use the services. Sorry, that's not services. Services that add DB context. Add DB context. Demo. Okay, I need to make sure I type it correctly. Demo DB context. So now we're telling it that we're adding our DB context here. So our DB context was demo DB context. I want to make sure that I bring it in, because it doesn't know the using the namespace. So you bring it in like that, and now it has a namespace in options. Going to options dot use SQL, use SQL. Hold on, doesn't look like this has the namespace here, so I have to type it manually and make sure that I type it correctly, and then I can bring the namespace over if you to let me. Yes, bring the namespace over. So it's using Entity Framework Core, so that's why we installed Entity Framework Core that time, right? And installed. It doesn't look like it doesn't look like that's it, but that should be it, right? Well, it's looking for the connection string right now, so let's pass the connection string, and I think it should be okay. No. So what is this? Quit helping me. Alright, so I'm going to pass the connection string right there, and once we put our semicolon, everything should be fine. Okay, in a nutshell, this is all we need to do to connect to the database. I'm going to summarize. The first thing I did was to add a class. Remember, this class, if you add a different table to your database, you need to add that class, that table class here again. So for every table you add, you need to be adding the classes right here. So for me, I just have one table, and then you need to add the DB context class. Once you do this setup, you need to, if you add another table, you need to do this DB set again for that table. So if you add 10 tables, you're going to have 10 DB sets here, and once that is done, you probably need to go to your connection string and set up your connection string like that. Once that is done, you come to your startup class in the configure services method. You set up your DB context like that, passing it the connection string like that, and that's it. That's what we need to set up to communicate with a database. Now that we have database set up, this will be a good time to actually go and test if our database is working, to just retrieve the users. Remember, we have 3 users in this table. We have test1, test2, and demo user 1. We need to be able to retrieve all of those from this database using our newly set up database. So let's go and do that. So I'm going to start doing it. But before we do that, we need to get access to our database here. We need to get access to our DB context database right here. So I'm going to do a private demo DB context. It's not the namespace is not here, so I need to type it out. DB context. I like to call that just underscore DB context. DB context, right? Well, we need to bring in a namespace. So when you hover over that little yellow bulb will be out. So you right click that, the namespace is there, you select it, and that's good. And in the constructor, I just want to do a little bit of injection in it. So you do ctor. Okay, I want to inject this over there in the constructor. and then just assign this guy over to this guy. That should be it. Oh no, what did I do? All right, that should be okay. DB context. All right, so that's it. Now we have access to that, and we should be getting it now here. But I want to do a try catch just in case there's an error that comes in. If there's an error, we need to throw a status code that there's an error. If you look at the status code, if you go look at your status code again, I told you earlier on in the video to go look at the status code. If you look at your status code again, you will see that um, there are status code error 500 is for internal server error. So if there is for any reason we have some error just happen while we're trying to connect to database, we should throw a 500 error, internal server error, something as a code. So an error as a code or internal server error as a code or something like that to tell the user that something happened, you know. So we could return this error. So you could type return status code. So we should see it right there, status code right here, right? Status code, and then if you do 500, status code 500 like that, okay? And then you can actually pass an object value just in case your company needs a particular, like your company has like a particular error that is being set up, or also you could actually set it up with this. And for here, I'm just gonna say an error has happened. I'm just gonna say an error has occurred. Like that would do for us. And then for our to get the data from our database, we need to do the DB context. So it's var users equals to a DB context that we created right here dot tbl table. Remember this table name that we created right here? Yes. So now we're going to use it. Table that is taking this guy right here. DB context is getting this guy, and this tbl users is getting the list of users, and then we are doing to list. Now if this list doesn't return anything, we also need to throw an error that the user is not found. So we're going to do it if users.count is equals to 0. That means we didn't find anything. We want to throw an error, user is not found. So that is a 404 status code. Status code 404 means whatever you're looking for is not found. So it's not available, it's not found. So status code 404, no user found. Okay, but if the user is found, we want to return an OK result with the user data. So we want to return an OK result with this user data right here if the user is found. Okay, so this OK result here at the bottom is not needed. Make sure you remove it. Okay, make sure you remove. Don't forget to remove this guy. If you're returning your user right here, make sure you remove this last guy here. Don't forget that. Okay, so that being said, so I think we are ready to test this again to make sure this is coming from database. Well, if it fails, then we're going to fix some things. Well, it's good that we're now going to try from database. Okay, so I'm going to run this again, and once it's running, once it's loaded, I'm going to go to Postman, and I have a breakpoint right there. Go to that breakpoint should let us test it very well. Test it. Okay, so it's loaded. So let's go to Postman. Remember we did the test with that dummy data that was returning a lot of nulls. Now we're actually going to database. So let's hit it from database and make sure it's hitting our database. Okay, so it comes here. So now let's see if our database will fail or not. Connection will fail. Where connection did not fail, and we should have our three records back. Yes, we got all of them back, and it's the same thing as it is in my database. So if you look at what is in the database, test 1, test 2, and this guy, so it's the same thing. So it's kind of hitting our database and bringing our record back. Yes, so we have our record back right here, test 1, test 2, and test demo user 1. Well, if you're able to get to this point, congratulations, you've actually been able to successfully create your API using Entity Framework Core database first approach. It is not that complicated, but you might have some errors with Entity Framework if the setup is not correct. So that is that. Now let's go and do the same things for, like, let's complete the rest of them for to create a new user and update user and delete user, and then we can run everything again and test everything together once we do this. Okay, so I'm going to stop this. I'm going to start it again and go to the create user portion of it. Okay, so all right, so that being said, for the create user portion of it, we need to create a new instance of this class. Remember this class that is for like the table, the TBL user, that is more like the representation of a table. We need to create a new instance of this class and then assign the request values to that class, and then pass it to the database context, to the DB context, and then save the DB context changes, DB context. So again, let me recap that. We need to create a new instance of the class TBL user, and then assign every value that we have from here to that class, to that instance, and then save it to the database using the DB context. Okay, so to save our time, I have already typed it out, so it's going to be something like that. Okay, it's going to be something like that. We're creating a new instance of that TBL user class, which is like the TBL user table, and then for every request, for all the things in the request, we're just passing it over to here, pass it over to here, pass it over to here. Now this TBL user table instance class now has it. Okay, now we need to save it to the database, so we need to pass it to the database table. And to do that, I want to put a try catch now, because this is a database stuff, and chances that it might fail, right? So again, if it fails, we're going to return a 500 status code that it has failed. So that's a 500 error status code, something an error as a code. If it doesn't fail, again, let's remove this guy before we forget. It's nice to always remove, because we're going to return the whatever we saved right there, or we're going to get new users and just return. If it doesn't fail, we want to add that to the table. So if it doesn't fail, we want to add it to the table. So we're going to add it to the table right here. Okay, remember, is the DB context dot TBL users. So the DB context, remember this guy right here, this is the DB context, and we are passing it into this table right here, into the DB set, the DB set table, DB set, right? And then we add it. Okay, now once it's added, now we need to save changes. Now that save changes, we commit it to database and save it to database. Okay, okay, now this is where the error might likely occur. If there's an error, if your code doesn't break here, then your save is correct. Okay, but if it breaks here, it's going to throw an exception here, and you're going to catch the exception right here. If you want to see what the exception is, make sure to put an EX here. I don't like, yeah, just put an EX here so you can see the exception. So when it breaks, it throws the exception. You can inspect this EX to read what the error message is, and then you can catch what the exception is from there. Okay, so that's that. Now, wouldn't it be nice after you save it, we just retrieve the data from the table that has been saved, so we could see that what we saved actually was returned back to us, so we can get the full data that was returned. And that's what I did. And then I'm going to just copy that and paste there, because I already wrote it on a text file. So you're going to do like a get again. Like, remember how you did a get in the first place? Remember how you did this get? this get right here. We're just going to do it again and just return that users back, and then this time around she return the users as that was saved as well. Okay, so that's that. Now this is all done for. I have to put a breakpoint here so that when we test it we can hit the breakpoint just so we can see it that it's hitting here. I'm going to remove this breakpoint. We've already tested this one, so let's go for update user section. The update user section is almost the same thing as the create, but the thing is, with the update we need to make use of the ID of that user that we're about to create, update, I mean, we're about to update, because we need to query the database table to get that user and then make changes to that user's row. So that's why that's one of the only difference that with the create. And of course, I already explained that update is HTTP put. So for that, I'm gonna remove this guy just so because we're writing this guy. So I'm gonna start with the try catch again, just in case there's an error. Just gonna catch it. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, ex. Okay, and like I said, we're gonna do get user. Sorry, let's start that var user equals to db context. Just in case you're confused where I'm getting this db context, if you're confused, remember that I created this private db context at the start of the page when we were doing when we started doing the db stuff, and this is db context I'm getting, and okay, I'm using just in case you're confused. All right, so that is that. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get the TBL user table. TBL user, where are you? Right, where's TBL user? TBL users table dot. I want to get the first or default. So first one or return the defaults, and lambda expression where x is going to. I'm sorry, what am I doing? X is going to x dot. I'm looking for the ID in this table, and where the ID is equals to our request object body, request object from the body dot the ID portion of it. So somebody, the people requesting for this data will be passing us an ID, right? So we want to make sure that that user is existing in the database before we go ahead and make a change. If not, we want to throw an error. No, that the user is not found. Something's wrong. So we're going to make sure if user is equals to null, if this is equals to null, let's just throw an error and tell them that hey, something is wrong. User is not found. This is a 404 error. 404. I've mentioned about 404 status error code. User is not found. 404 is user is not found. Your record is not found, or something is not found. What you're trying to request for is not found. Okay, so that is that. And then if an error happens, remember how we always throw an error. If an error, it's like if exception happens, we want to throw a status code 500, which is like an internal server error or something went wrong. So we just want to put it right here. So just so we're making sure we are actually catching all these little cases, because it's possible that some things could go wrong in your API, and you need to make sure you're catching all these things and you're returning the appropriate errors for them and the error code for them as well. Okay, so now that we make sure that the user is found, and when we make sure that user is found and it's not null, then we can do the mapping now again. Now we are going to be mapping from whatever value that we have from the request. We're going to map it to this user. So we're going to be changing the user data by passing these values from the request into the user data right here. And then we are going to do the same thing as to save it. So we're going to do like that. So from the request that is coming from the user, we are passing username back to this user. So if the username changes from request, it's going to change in this user as well. First name, whatever changes from this request is going to change here too. And then when that is done, we are going to do the db context.entry. Don't forget to do db context.entry dot. So you do that db context, that our same db context dot entry, you pass the entry, which is the username. I mean, the user object is the entry. Dot state equals to entity state dot modified. That means you're modifying that record. Well, in this case, this guy needs to get the entity framework core using namespace. So just right click and add it. Or if you're typing it, if you're typing it and it's not there, just type it first. Make sure you type the casing correctly, uppercase, lowercase correctly, and then just right click and then add it. Okay. And then once you do that, don't forget to save your changes. So the db context of save changes is the next line that we're going to do. Okay, so once you do that, db context would save the changes, and then your user would have been updated by now. But again, I like to see, after I update the user, I would like to retrieve the table back just to see what the changes are. So that's why I'm going to be adding this line to get to retrieve the user as well. Remember what we did when we were creating? Again, when we update it, we just retrieve it again, db context and tbl user, retrieve it, and then return. Now, okay is a status code of 200. 200 status code means everything was successful, and okay means everything was successful. And then we'll pass in this users that we are retrieving from the database, and it's going to launch it out. So that is that. That was fun, right? That was fun. Well, you can pause the video and type along, and then you could pause it right here and type all these things. Once you finish typing this top part, I'm going to scroll down, and then you're going to type this bottom part for that. Okay, once you're done with this part, I want to go to delete. So the delete is kind of simple because we're just trying to get that particular user and just delete it. It's that simple, right? Again, I want to do the try catch because I'm hitting database. Oh no, I always do this. Making sure that that's not selected before I make my next move. And again, we need to kind of return say that this is an error, something has occurred right there. Just make sure you return that first. And for the delete is the same thing though. Just make sure delete is the same thing as this guy, but for delete there's no request, right? So it's just the ID, and the ID is being passed along. And I want to also just copy everything here. Same thing, but just make sure that you're here. We don't have a request, right? So remember, this is going to throw an error, but remember we passed the ID along on the route. Okay, on the route. So it is actually from the route. Okay, like that. We're getting it from the route like that. Okay, so it's right there, and it's going to delete. Actually, there's something you can actually decorate this to like this too, from like say from what am I doing? You can do like that from route. There's something, yeah, from route. So it's going to take it from the route and pass it to the ID like that. Actually, I think this is more appropriate. So the whole configuration and the whole system, the whole application knows that this is coming from the route. And then if this is not available in database, just tell them the user is not found. 404 user is not found. That means we cannot delete. It's going to return not found. But if the user is found, again we're going to do the db context.entry and pass the user. Now this time around, instead of entity state dot modified, it's going to be entity state dot deleted. Okay, for delete. So it's the same thing like that. So it's same thing like that top one. So it's same thing, right? So it's db context entry dot entry. You pass it to your user that the entry that you're trying to modify, or the state you're trying to change, dot state equals to entity state dot deleted. This time around it's not modified, it's deleted for delete. And then we're going to save changes, and this will delete it. And then again, I want to get that user. Okay, I want to get this user. All right, so that does it for the whole thing. And let's go test this now. Let's take it for a ride. Okay, so we already tested get user, right? So we're not going to test that. So next thing we're going to create a user. And that's our next target. This is exciting, right? It's exciting. We're almost done. So let's just test it. And if everything is working fine, then we are done. And then congratulations, you'll be able to create a working API and working API using Entity Framework Core database first approach and using your regular ASP.NET Core as well. All right, so this application has loaded, and then let's go to our Postman. Again, the get we already tested. The get is always coming. Okay, the get came with all those three things in our database. These three records right here in the database. So that's fine. So now we're going to create. So we have three records right now. ID number 3 is the last. ID number 6 is the last one. So we're going to add the next one. It's going to be ID number 8 or 7 or 9 or something. I think I deleted something. So let's do the post. So for this post, let's change this. So this was the last one that I posted, right? So let's change the name to username to I love coding. That's interesting, right? I love coding. All right, so let's give it a name as Clark 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 Low. Okay, this person will be in Alexandria, Virginia. Alexandria. Oh, sorry, that's not how to spell Alexandria. Alexandria, Virginia, USA. Virginia. All right, so this is that, and then I'm going to save it. I have a breakpoint, so it's going to hit our breakpoint. So let's go and save this person. We should have another record with maybe. Okay, so we have this in our request body. See, it's right there. Everything is coming. No ID because this is create. Okay, and my database is actually set up to auto increment. I don't have to pass in the ID in database table. So this everything is good here. So it's going to pass it over to this table class, and then we're going to save it here. And if nothing happens here, then that means our connection is good. Everything was saved correctly. I'm just going to continue. So we should see that it has saved and it has given us a new record. ID number 8. I love coding. Nice. Clark and all of that. If we go to our database, we should see that it's going to add the 4th record. And I'm just going to execute this query. So it added the 4th record. I love coding. Clark, Lowe, Alexandria, and all of that. So our connection is working and our API is working. So I'm going to remove this breakpoint, just that. So the next thing we're going to do is to update that last record we added, this I love coding record. We're going to change it to something else. Let's just change it to something else. I don't know what we're going to change it to. So I'm going to copy this. No, not that one. I like to copy everything because we need the ID this time around because we're going to be updating a particular record, so we need the ID. So I'm going to update this guy here. I'm going to be updating this. All right. How about we delete everything so we don't get confused? Let's just. Can I delete it? Can I remove it? It looks like I can't remove it, so let's leave it like that. It's okay. Let's just leave it like that. We know what you're trying to change, so let's try to change this guy here. Okay, so I'm changing this guy here to ID number 8. Okay, don't change the ID. The ID is the target. You're targeting record for ID number 8. And then I want to change the username to Clark my clock. Can we just do that? my clock, my clock 12. That's my username, right? And we're going to change the last name for clock to be George. So Clark George now, from what it was before, lower it to George, and we're going to say that the person lives in Springfield, Virginia, or Springfield, Virginia, Springfield, Virginia. So we change the username, we change the last name, and everything else is the same. Now let's take note of what it was before. It was I love coding. It was Clark Lowe and Springfield and Alexander. Now this is going to change to Springfield and all of that. So let's go and update the record, and you see that it's going to update correctly. The breakpoint is here. I like to put a breakpoint so we could see. I don't just want to update it like that, then you don't know what's going on, and then all of a sudden something changes. Okay, so we have it as Alexander right now, but we're going to change it to this guy here, Springfield, and then my Clark 2 and all of that. Okay, so let's go on. So there's a record. That means everything should be fine. That saves correctly. So that saved correctly. So everything should be fine. And then when we go look at the record number 8, it changed to my Clark 2, Springfield, Virginia, and George is the last name now. When we go and run the record, you're going to see that this is going to change to Springfield. This should change to George. So let's run it again. So this changed to my Clark, this changed to George and Springfield. So that is working correctly. Let's go delete the last row, the last record, and that will conclude our edition, our recording for. Okay, so ID number 8. We're trying to delete ID number 8. Okay, fingers crossed. ID number 8 is going away. Okay, so it hits the breakpoint right there, and we have the ID. See, from route, it says from route, right? We have the body, we have the ID right there, and then we're gonna get it in the database to make sure that that record exists first before we do anything like delete. Okay, so the record exists. You could see that the record exists. See, Springfield, USA, number 8, and George. Okay, that record exists, and you could now go ahead and delete it now. So let's go ahead and delete. Remember, entity state is deleted. Now once you save changes, it has saved to database, and that record should not be there anymore. So we don't have that record anymore. You could see that that record is gone, and in the database it is. I'm going to refresh it now. You're going to see the database is gone too. So we're back to 3 records. The database is gone. Well, congratulations for learning how to program an API, how to create your own API, build your own API, and not just only that, you've studied and you've known how to build your own API with database entity framework database first approach. Okay, so entity framework core database first approach. This is nice, and this is really clean code that we just wrote here, and I hope that this actually helped you to learn and helps you to understand how to create APIs in the future. If your company asks you to create an API, this is the basics. Sometimes your company will have different logic and different things, but this is just the basic of how to get from database and how to create a user, like how to post a user, create a user, or create a product, or create anything creatable usually over, and then how to update that record, and then how to delete the record as well right here. So congratulations for achieving all of this. I'm happy to have been the one to teach you, and next week, or my next video will be coming out about a week from now. Next week, I'll be teaching you. My next video, I'll be teaching you how to consume this API. So we're going to use this same API. So please subscribe to my channel so that when I upload the next video, how to maybe by the time you watch this, it's probably out there already. So I will be teaching you how to consume this API on my next video. Okay, So please subscribe to my channel, like this video, turn on your bell notification button so that you will see when I upload the next video on how to consume this API. So you could actually know how to write an API and how to consume an API. So we will be building a web application that consumes this API. Just a user will register, and then we will save the user registration, and then we will take the user to their profile, user profile, and then they can edit as well and delete as well. So that's what it is. So thank you very much for watching with me. I really appreciate you guys, and peace out. Have a lovely day wherever you are. All right, peace out.